Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Plakon, for indulging me again. I know that we're good friends, but as you always say about me, I say the same thing about you. Scott Plakon is my good friend. He just has a lot of really bad ideas.
I thought of that first, by the way. No, you got that from me.
You were the first to say that.
Good guy with bad ideas.
Touche,
right? Okay.
touche. So going along that train of thought on really bad ideas, Senator Abruzzo was just alluding to the fact that we don't really know what the consequences are, both intended and unintended, of this bill. And it seems like the path that we're going here is the path that the only way that we will know what the real consequences are of House Bill 25 is if we pass it into law and see what happens. Are you open to any type of amendment where we can at least have a study that tells us what unions would be decertified in the case that this bill were to pass into law? Because it's still my understanding that automatically these unions would be put on the chopping block for decertification as a result of your bill. What are those unions? Are you open to an amendment?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've already answered that question, and the answer is no, but I can suggest a much easier solution rather than a study. You know, while we're at it, we can form a task force, and like the legislatures often do when they want to do nothing. I would suggest just call around and ask some of the unions that I know you all know members of, and ask them what the percentage of the bargaining unit. That's what I did. So if it affects just a small number of labor unions that are far below 50%, fair enough. If it's a large number, then that should be addressed, or if it's medium. You know, so I don't see, given the policy objectives of the bill, I don't see a reason to amend the other parts off because they will just function based on what that study, if you will, is that's already baked into the bill.
Just making sure we do new questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Plakon. To your point, I don't need to call around to ask what the impact of the bill is going to be, because working people around the state are calling our offices for us, and they are telling us. We've heard from graduate assistants today at our legislative offices. I was just talking to Representative Jacobs, who are panicked that if your bill passes, that their union will absolutely certainly face decertification and disbandment under your bill. Have you met with any of these unions? Have you heard their concerns? They're rallying outside right now as we speak in protest because they believe that their voices are going to be absolutely ignored in this committee. Have you met with them?
Recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I have, in my district office and up here.
So,
follow-up?
Sorry, thank you. Representative Plakon, what organizations are supporting your bill and officially saying that they support House Bill 25?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I mean, it's not to the substance, but you're welcome to answer if you'd like.
Yeah, I would really normally don't go into bills of who's support, who's against, because that's kind of a amorphous question, and there's different levels of support. I generally don't talk about that if you look back on my bills of who supports, who doesn't. So I generally, it's not a question I've tended to answer over the years.
Yep. To the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With all due respect, Representative Plakon, I'm asking which organizations are supporting your bill because I think it will give us valuable insight in whether or not organized groups that have the interests of Florida workers at heart are in support of this, or if they're not in support of this. So because you have said your bill is specifically meant to support workers who feel underrepresented, are there any organizations that represent working people who are supporting your bill?
I think, I do think he answered the question, but we do have a great number of appearance cards. I think we're going to hear from people on both sides, both for and against the bill here shortly, if that'll satisfy. Okay, question on the bill.
Thank you, Chair Caldwell, and I will ask those organizations why they're supporting or opposing when they come up. I think that if we are automatically saying that we're going to decertify a union because a majority of the union members are not paying their union dues, the assumption is embedded in there that they're not paying the union dues because they don't support the existence of the union and they don't support their membership in the union. Is that the assumption that you're making?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is a process, and it requires, I believe, 30% of the members to put forth a proposal to decertify the bargaining agent. Now, these 30% are people that don't even care enough To make that process work, you have to take 30% of the bargaining unit, people that don't even care enough to pay their dues, to somehow mobilize to do that, and I think that that's an unlikely scenario. So again, the problem to be solved is how do you solve that problem, and I don't think it's right for 3%, let's say a bargaining unit of 10,000 people having 100 paying members. I think that that's a problem, and so this bill is an attempt to solve that problem.
Thank you for that. I'm hearing what you're saying, but also what I heard and what you were saying was a gigantic assumption, which was that if they don't care enough to show up and they don't care enough to participate, then there's an implication and an assumption there that they simply don't support the union. My question is do you believe it to be possible that the reason some of these union members are either not paying their dues or not showing up to regular meetings, could it be possible that the reason they're not doing that is because they are working and they don't have time, and they join the union so that the union can go ahead and advocate for them on their behalf because they have no time?
You're in a series.
We're talking about time or money. The time, I understand it, that there's time for union votes, and that's all provided for under law. We're talking about the money, and I guess, you call it an assumption, I guess you could call it that if 97% of the people don't see enough value in being represented by this bargaining agent to not even pay a nominal amount of dues, then I would suggest that there's a real question of whether they are properly representing those people.
Okay, and my question also is, do you believe it to be possible, especially considering that these are state employees, that the minimum wage in the state, I believe now, is $8.10 per hour. Is it possible the reason they're not paying dues is because they can't afford it because they're being paid a starvation wage, and they actually have a constitutional right to be a part of the union and not pay union dues?
Sorry, out of habit, I always look that way. Well, if that were so, if you look at some of the other public sector unions, we've heard that, and I believe that, firefighters and police officers, they're not known for the high pay. Let's acknowledge, I think we'd all like to see them paid more. But I've been told that most of them are more than 90% of the bargaining unit that pay their dues. So to suggest that, in some of these other unions they can't pay the dues, I don't think is congruent with the idea that the public sector unions, they have a very high turnout of people paying dues.